Okay, thanks Reed for the due diligence on pronunciations. When I worked in manufacturing, actually the first time I met with all the folks on the floor, I said that if they give me trouble, I'm going to ask them to pronounce my name correctly. So a little bit about me. I'm Sahana Mukherjee, and I have built my career by running towards the unknown. I moved from engineering to HR, moved countries, worked across industries, and right now I am the global head of HR for wealth and personal banking, technology and production management at Citigroup, which is essentially a very long way of saying the end-to-end technology of 2 of our 5 core businesses. As a passion project, I also run a nonprofit called Unveiled, Bridging the Gap to Sponsorship, where we help individuals break the cycle of being over-mentored and under-sponsored, in enabling them to gain equitable access to opportunities. Now today, I think like we need to, we have so many amazing people from different industries, different backgrounds. So we'll try to make this a little bit interactive. So we are exchanging ideas because that's what I think is the benefit of all these events that we take time out for. And today, when we talk about it, now I know that's a long kind of title, but one thing that I want us to all focus on is reimagine. So that's kind of what we are going to do through our session today. So before we get started, we are not going to talk about HR. We are going to talk about the future of work, business, and people. And guess what? HR is at the center of it all. And before we dive in, a quick show of hands. So raise your hand if you have ever worked with a business leader who said that they want HR to be more strategic, but then ignored all the recommendations. Okay. Now, raise your hand if you know that your company is investing in AI, but you're not quite sure if HR is fully leveraging it yet. Okay. Now, last one. So I have a rule of 3s, okay? I know beyond that, people just drop. Raise your hand if you think that HR should have a bigger role in shaping business strategy. Great, this was what I was hoping for. That got 100%. So for over a century, the primary way work has been done and defined is jobs. We write job descriptions. We hope one person will fit all the things that we have listed on those jobs. Now, anything that is over a century old, over 100 years, I think it needs some reevaluation at some point. And I think that we are getting to that point where we really need to reevaluate. Because what happens is when we look at the way jobs are structured, it also defines, by who, what, who is it led by, and then it also defines how like the HR supports that, job, whether we're talking about compensation, hiring, promotions, performance management, and so on. So when we think of, jobs, and yes, maybe that was something that we had to kind of restrict ourselves to, but now more and more, that is potentially becoming a derailer for the critical needs of organizations today, which is agility, growth, and innovation. So how do we make something that's more kind of, we are looking at the whole ecosystem. We are looking at becoming more agile ourselves and being able to play around with all the skills that we have in our organizations. And I think Unilever actually has done great work, some great work around this. They have pioneered the skills-based structure within their organization, where they have actually, they treat roles as a collection of skills. and they have an internal marketplace where they enable the fluidity of skills across the entire organization. It can be through your permanent, you can be a permanent employee who is kind of moving across the organization, or you can be what they call a U worker, which is an interesting concept. It's a contractor type of, but they're on a basic kind of retainer type of approach, and they have a core set of benefits. And their commitment is to kind of, for their skills, to move around like short-term projects and tasks across the organization. Now imagine if we are able to do this across all organizations, like mass, across globally. It can also really help us address one of the kind of ever-present challenge that we talk about, silos, right? So if people are moving across the organization, they are bringing perspective from all these different projects and tasks that they are doing across the organization. So that can also help us break silos in organization. So when we think about these things, it's really important for us to think about how that translates into our organization. Now, one of the important aspects to always remember is every organization is in a different journey, right? So we also have to recognize that of where we are on that journey and what makes sense. So in terms of, when you think of how HR can be reimagined in this context, so if you're thinking about like a skills-based, looking at becoming more dynamic, it is about kind of, HR is more and more, HR is no longer about people and processes. It is about being the, creating that whole thriving, dynamic ecosystem across organization and really being the architect behind it. So that's kind of one aspect of how we can reimagine organizations when we look at it from a skills perspective. We also think, like, there are studies, Deloitte actually did the study that 73% of employees said that if they have skills-based practices, then it would improve their experience at work. And that same study also showed a whopping 100 skills-based organizations, skills-based practices can help, are 107% more likely to place talent effectively. Think of our hiring practices, right? Like, if we are able to actually map through skills and kind of really break apart our jobs into tasks and projects and really bring the best skills from across the ecosystem, that can really help us place talent effectively, right? So when we think about, again, like from an ecosystem view, right, the other aspect of what it means is we are all talking about AI, but one thing is that, yes, AI is really kind of putting a lot of functions at inflection points where they are being forced to reimagine how they operate, reimagine the future, reimagine their kind of sustained relevance, how they can kind of continue to stay relevant in the market. But it's also not new. We have seen technology do this multiple times to us, right? Like it changes the dialogue. And that's something that we can learn from technology. That how do we, in the HR function, how do we change the dialogue? And that's where I think when we think about our metrics, that could be a powerful tool. But that's also like, it needs a little bit of reimagination there as well. So Walmart has actually been investing in AI strategically for several years. And they have looked at their supply chain optimization, their inventory management. So they have truly integrated AI into their processes, which has actually led to 100 times productivity boost since the investment started. Now, the interesting thing, if you learn about their workforce management aspect of it, the interesting thing that they have done is they have used AI to really kind of look at their scheduling of workforce management, reducing labor cost, and kind of really optimizing the workforce management aspect of it. But what the data that they have analyzed to do that is things like sales forecast, foot traffic patterns, and employee availability, to then kind of look at the scheduling so that they have enough associates at all times to meet customer demand. So it's not like the traditional HR metrics, right? And that's kind of how we need to think about how are we integrating, how are we measuring our impact in the context of the business. And it does not necessarily need to come from the traditional HR metrics of, you know, attrition, turnover, like all the things that we typically look at. How do we think of like those types of business metrics, which I find very interesting, like that they are the sales forecast, foot traffic patterns, those are the types of things that has made their workforce management so much more informed and so much more efficient. And the other thing that they have also done is the other aspect from an employee experience standpoint, if you think about it, how do we help people get to that higher level of, you know, work, right? So they have actually integrated AI-powered decision support tools where they help their employees give employees real-time insights to help them make informed decisions and solve complex problems more efficiently than they would have been able to do in the past. So those are the types of things that we need to really think of. How are we really integrating in the business? It's not about having a seat at the table anymore. Like that's not just achieving our outcome. We have to truly think like a business leader, and we have to think about all the metrics and the data that we can analyze to really help our workforce achieve that higher level of potential and get to more complexity in terms of how work is happening, what outcomes we are achieving, and really staying relevant in the market. Okay. Now, again, so throughout the theme, the other theme that you'll see is ecosystem. So it's always about the ecosystem, right? Like we have a transactional environment, right? Like our direct stakeholders, our employees. We have the contextual environment where obviously technology is one of the things, socioeconomic environment, geopolitical environment, all of these things could have an impact on our business. But imagine like what if we could predict those trends before we are on the verge of getting disrupted, before we are able to, we are forced into it, right? So then, that's where kind of the future plan comes in. And again, depending on where you are in the learning, in your organizational journey, right? Like you have to map out. So Siemens actually has instituted a People and Organization 2030 strategy where they have 3 key ambitions, and they're aligning everything on those 3 key ambitions, right? So they have skills for life, where they are focused on personalized learning models, which has actually been elevated by World Economic Forum in their latest report as well. And that's kind of where it's really important for us to reimagine, like functions like learning, right? Like we no longer have the luxury of working out learning models and then taking months, potentially a year, to roll it out across this massive organization. By that time, whatever we are rolling out is kind of not as relevant or not as urgent anymore, right? So we have to think about that. The other pillar that they have is called organizing for impact. So that's where they are focused on transformation that outpaces the market. And then the third one is leaders who transform, people who are bridging that real and digital world and really enabling the other 2 pillars that they have. So if you think of it in a strategy perspective, they don't have like different, they're calling it people and organization strategy, but it's really holistic, right? Like you're thinking of it in the whole piece, not just as an HR, like just focused on one aspect of it, but really recognizing that there are all these different aspects, and it is a holistic view. We succeed together as a whole organization, right? So then when you think of, you know, when you think of the look at things like learning models, those are the types of things that we need to think about. Like, how do we actually create those personalized learning models and then scale, right? Like anything that we set up, it's fine to pilot it in a smaller group. And again, technology is a great kind of function that we can learn from it, that they always kind of have that approach. Okay, let's just pilot and test it out. But then the way you set up, even in that pilot version, it has to have that map of how would you scale it across larger organization. And that's where I think, like, when we talk about HR tech in general, we tend to think like differently, right? Like we have a solution for recruitment, we have a solution for learning, but then how are we bringing it all together and making sure that we are preparing our organizations to scale those solutions as well? That's how it will really change the dynamic in the mainstream. So a quick kind of, you know, again, I'll throw it out there. Let's see who is bold enough to do kind of a swap. Okay, so think of innovations in your industry, maybe in another industry. What would you say is an innovation that would be great to swap into another industry? And I can give an example to get us started. Similar to what I talked about, the Walmart, right? Like the AI kind of scheduling, workforce management scheduling. I think it could potentially be good for like healthcare in nurse scheduling as well, that we can think of, right? So we can translate that solution into a different industry. Any other ideas? Yes?
Yeah, so I come from banking and financial services, and we've always built risk models around lending, right? So now I'm into the new HR tech space, and I think we can take those models to kind of look at how do we forecast wellness and growth for employees.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same data, but now looking at it a little different.
Yeah, that's good. Great, thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? And I love the point you make about risk, because I think that in today's world, again, when we are talking about AI governance, we also talk so much about, okay, what do we do from a risk perspective? How do we actually really have fun with it? But then there are all these things, and especially in financial services, right? Like highly regulated environment. How do we actually have fun with it? And this is where I feel, so do we have any adventure, like sports folks here? Anyone who is into adventure sports? I'm not, but so anyone who's into adventure sports, paragliding, skydiving, you okay? Read. Okay, yes, I'll give you that. Okay, well, that's more than me. So if you think of like things like paragliding, right? They have a set of, I guess, like I think of it in terms of like a control framework, right? Like they have a set of that control framework that they establish, but then you can have fun with it. It is set up in a way that you can then maximize that thrill kind of experience. It's not the safest, but then you're also able to have fun with it because they have those established framework. And that's how I think, like, we also need to start thinking of, like, when we are thinking of things like risk, which typically gives like you know, that kind of a feeling, risk and governance, but I think it can actually be quite fun if you get creative with it and like think of it from that framework perspective and really maximizing the fun that we can have once we have that framework established. So kind of so that's kind of like if you think of the three aspects that we touched upon, right? Like one is how are we reimagining our workforce, things like jobs? How are we reimagining our metrics, things like and integrating into the business? And how are we thinking about like our strategy holistically, and bringing about changes like, our learning models, for instance. Now, if we think about, again, going back to the rule of threes, I think like that's where we are really kind of, again, very simplistically, right? We have to think about disrupting ourselves before we get disrupted. We have to think about how we're designing our strategy, our workforce, and really kind of defining, making sure that we are clear on our why, clear on the path forward, right? And three things that we can, from an HR function, what we can do is really break silos. And that's not just within the HR function, but broadly. But we know that we are also siloed within the HR function. So we have to be, and that takes a lot of intention and how we integrate it into the workflow, that it almost becomes an organic part of our process, right? Because again, at the end of the day, let's face it, like all of us, we get like we have jobs, we need to focus on our work. So the more kind of out of the workflow we have to connect and like try to coordinate, it gets challenging at times. So how do we actually, again, the secret sauce is like, how do we integrate into the workflow that it becomes part of how we operate? And then when we think of, how do we get to more agile decision making? In HR, like everything, we are still talking about things in the annual context, annual processes, annual rollout, right? Like how do we move away from that? And how do we really get comfortable with that pilot and reiterating, and let's test it out, let's play around with it, and then let's scale it out, right? So how do we move quickly? And that's kind of really important for us to, from a metrics perspective, I think like what are we analyzing? And again, like how do we move quickly? That's kind of really important. And the last thing is, as I said, measuring HR's business impact. So, I was having a conversation earlier about, a key a standard metric is, we talk about time to fill. But then what does it really do, right? Yes, we can potentially reduce our time to fill, but then if the onboarding sucks, then, so then how are we actually reimagining the way we operate and reimagining, again, how we are part of shaping the business strategy, right? Like that's really important. If you think about, again, like, the World Economic Forum, they published their 2024 report, and they talked about the aviation industry, right? Like, so it is really, at a very critical, talent, they are facing a very critical talent shortage, where they're talking about potentially requiring, with new passengers, new airlines, new routes opening, they're talking about potentially 350,000 pilots that will be needed by 2026. That's next year. Now, if you think about it in one go, that's overwhelming, right? Like, and I'm not quite sure I'm comfortable with like breaking down skills for pilots yet. So I would rather have one pilot for my flight, whatever I'm boarding. But the thing is that it's important for us to break it down and really think of, where our organizations are, right? Like how do we get started on the journey? How do we get started on addressing these critical challenges that everyone is talking about? Because let's face it, no matter how many times, with every tech innovation, how many times it is said that, oh, this is going to take people out. Humans are a stubborn race. We never go away. We figure out a way to stay relevant, right? So that's kind of where we need to think about of how are we reimagining ourselves to truly be that, forward looking and shaping the future. And how are we creating that ecosystem where business, technology, and talent can co-evolve as we are getting into this unknown, right? So with that, I'll say really the fundamental secret sauce, what I think, like, again, coming back to us, right, as individuals. We talk about organizations all the time, but what can we do? I think from an each individual perspective, the fundamental skill that we need to keep honing and keep fostering in our organizations is adaptability. Because that's becoming more and more critical, and that's becoming a kind of really a non-negotiable skill set to maintain that growth, maintain that sustained relevance, and keep staying ahead in the market. Because, guess what? It's time for HR to disrupt or be disrupted. So right now, it is the future. It is going to be ecosystem driven, and we need to reimagine the way we operate. But the good thing is that we are the architect. So we have the power to build this together. So with that, I will open up for questions. Yes.
So when you were talking about looking at the impact and sustainable solutions versus retention, what metrics would you use to look at that versus looking at retention metrics?
So I'll say like retention is good, but then are we retaining the right talent? How are we developing that talent, right? It's not enough to just retain talent, but then we could look at mobility metrics. We can look at promotion metrics, right? Like, are we retaining the talent that is continuing to develop across the organization? And it doesn't need to be, and the reason I kind of think that mobility and promotion go hand in hand, because not everyone needs to keep getting promoted, right? Like, people can move into lateral roles, and that's kind of their sweet spot, and that's where we need them in the organization. But as long as they're kind of moving and helping bring those different skill sets across the organization, I think that's important. Great question. Yes.
Well, thanks so much, Sahana, first of all. I was wondering if you could give us maybe a couple of use cases of HR, people analytics within Citigroups, and sort of where your maturity model, where the people analytics maturity stands, and sort of the maturity model.
I think we are getting there. So it's like, we do have a people analytics function, and we have, over the few years, there has been investment in that. So we are moving to a more insights based, right? Like, so it's not like, if I think of a decade earlier, it was, I think a lot of journeys that we would sound familiar is it was primarily focused on reporting. Right, like downloading data, and that's great that we have a report now. But it's more about like, okay, so what are the insights? And then from my perspective, right, like as an HR business partner, in that, like, I want the insight so that I can have like an informed decision with the executive kind of leadership, that this is what we need. Like, this is what the data, the storytelling aspect, right? This is what the data is telling us, and these are the things that we could think about. Yeah. Yes.
You talked a lot about the ecosystem, and as we grow and learn about this ecosystem, sometimes we're like, oh, it's overwhelming. I got my work to do. I'm trying to work on the outside, trying to bring it in. Just suggestions from an HR perspective of being able to focus on that ecosystem and what might be helpful as we just continue to evolve and grow and just continue to do what we're doing.
I think it could be a combination of things, right? And every person is different. I like to read a lot. So for me, and as I said, like, while I have left engineering, the engineer is still in me. So I still am very curious about like what's happening in tech, for instance, right? Like, and the ecosystem around it. But I think there are different ways on what you are comfortable with. You could meet people from different backgrounds, different disciplines, right? Like, and have that as part of your way to talk about it. It could be internal too, in your organization, right? That you could kind of connect with people from different functions and really have conversations like, what's happening with you? What are you focused on, right? Like, so just from that curiosity, I think curiosity is the really kind of required in that you are curious about what's happening in different spaces, and then really think about, okay, what could be potential implications down the line for this, right? So that's kind of one thing, like, for instance, even in AI, right? Like EU passed the AI Act. They were the first ones to kind of pass the AI Act, where they tackle things like, which if you read about it, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Like that would be normal. So, transparency, right? Like what data is, what data are you using to train your AI model, right? When people are interacting with AI, are you disclosing that they're interacting with AI, right? Things like that. So it kind of makes common sense, but then obviously, like with any new technology, with any new thing that's really disrupting, it's important to kind of explicitly lay it out for everyone, right? So I think it's generally kind of how, like, keeping track of different things, and it could be through conversations, it could be through reading, or a combination. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
We hear a lot about AI as like a concept. Do you have any specific software that you think has worked well?
So I think in a lot of cases, as I said, that it is, um, it's getting there, right? So I'll say, and everything like with AI, right? Like everything is, it's the learning journey as well, the machine learning aspect, right? So like for my nonprofit, for instance, I started using ChatGPT when it came out, and starting from content and everything. And initially, when I was setting out, like I had to give very detailed prompts on, what's the nonprofit about, and what, like the tone that I want, and like the target audience that I'm going for. But now it's got it. Like I have to give like minimal instructions, and then it generates the content, right? So I think that that's where we have to also kind of approach it with that mindset, that we are also kind of investing in building these tools out to help us more in the future, right? So I think like there are different solutions for, say, hiring. I think that one of the things with technology, what I've seen is hiring has been a key focus. There are a lot of solutions for hiring, and they do focus on how do we look at profiles differently and really bring transferable skills, like looking at it from a perspective of skills matching. And this could be a good path historically, but then again, it goes back to the historical data that we are using, because famously Amazon, when they implemented something like that, turns out that it was disqualifying all the women candidates, because their historic data was all white men in leadership positions, right? So they had to kind of backtrack that, right? So I think it's kind of looking at those things, but then also kind of understanding the data behind it to help us. So I would say, like from a holistic solution perspective, I think we're getting there. Yes.
So how is Citi looking at the technology in regards to sort of buy versus build? Because I've been talking to a lot of organizations that are embracing the large language models and trying to build their own business process and their own product. How are you guys doing that?
I think like one of the things for any, I think for any kind of industry which is as regulated as we are, it is important to kind of look at the privacy of the information, right? Like how are we protecting data? So for us, like I think it's like there is partnership aspect of it, but then we have to have internal. So we have a very robust internal AI team, like that's focused on emerging technology, and they are kind of really setting things up in our internal ecosystem so that we are protecting our data within our organization. Because again, like we are highly regulated, and the type of data we have, we cannot have anything in the public domain. Yeah, okay. Great. Well, thank you everyone. You've been great. Over to Reed.
Good job.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Sahana. And great questions. Appreciate all those questions and everyone's involvement and good content. So thank you, Sahana. So excited to welcome our next speaker up here from Groot Hospitality, Julie Howe. Let's give Julie a round of applause. And I hope I got that right.
Yes, that's right, actually.
All right. It looked like an easier
so
one
many ways
to pronounce. All right. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Got it. What's that? Okay, got it. All right. Well, look, I'm happy to be here. That was great. A lot of things that we just learned and just talked about will kind of bleed into what I'm going to go into. And one of the things I really like was talking about the ecosystem and how she talked about thinking for the future and planning, because it's such an important thing. A lot of what I deal with the executives today is reacting. And the where we're headed, there is so much opportunity to be proactive and be just growing and developing rather than constantly reacting to what we're dealing with. So, okay, so we're going to be talking today about how to work with executives to think about the company as a whole and the population, and how we can integrate some of the great new technologies and things that we have to better our organizations. And it's really interesting because, leadership is changing. Our workforce population is changing. And one of the things I talk a lot about with our executive team is how do we react to that? And how do we as leaders change the way that we think and we develop? It used to be, we talked about we're going to teach our employees what we need, what the organization needs, what you need to do your job well, to make your boss happy, to earn more money. And, I'm going in hot here. And it's different now, right? The way we communicate and the way that we have to assess and move forward is very, very different. This is going to date me, but when I started my career, my first supervisory role, I learned that I needed to move faster and do things quicker in this hospitality role when a steak or a fork or a plate got thrown at me, right? That was how my boss said, move faster, do more, I learned about how the P&L works and costs works when I dropped a plate of 5, surf and turfs. And my boss at the end of that sat me down and said, this is what it costs. This is the food cost. This is the labor cost. This is the comp cost because they're upset. And these are the 2 days that you're going to work unpaid to make up for that cost. And let me tell you, it worked. I learned. But you can't do those things anymore. And also, our populations learn different. Our employees are much more, dynamic and intuitive in a lot of ways, and they have a lot more self in their day-to-day. So I think that this is a really great approach when we're leaders, and to look at that and to get on the level, and you've heard this throughout your whole career, you need to get on the level of the people that you're talking to. You need to connect with them where they're at. And a lot of times, where they're at is very different with some of the leaders are at today, in technology and how they learn, in the interactive nature of what they do. So we're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk about leadership gaps, and we're going to talk about how to utilize these tools and some of the tools that we are going to utilize. And I'm going to use case examples, because what I find works best is talking about examples and how this was used before. So we're going to work at that. We talked already about some of the challenges, the outdated methods, the leadership gaps, the team issues. These are all important things. If we're sitting down, she mentioned earlier looking at things annually. If we're sitting down with our teams once a year and we're evaluating everything that they've done, technically everything that they've done in the last year, what we're really looking at is the last 30 days, the last 60 days. What is foremost in the leader's mind? As executives, as leaders, we're saying, okay, is this person driving me nuts right now? Or are they executing and doing their job? And that's not working, because they could be doing an amazing job for 9 months out of the year, 10 months out of the year, 12 months out of the year, and the last 2 weeks or the last month, there's a struggle, right? Whatever that struggle is. And so that's what's in people's mind, our leaders' mind, when they're evaluating. So we have to think about those kind of things. And we have to look at the team issues as a whole. How are we looking at those? How are we addressing them? Okay. So opportunities come from AI. I know for a lot of companies and a lot of individuals, it's very scary. We don't want our jobs to be lost because of AI, and we don't know how to use it. It's a lot to learn. I've only in the last few years really kind of buckled down and tried to learn the tools, and it's you know, it's had a lot of benefit. So, you know, personalization is a great aspect of how we're using AI. Our teams now and our employee populations need things to be personalized to them. They do not respond to the one-size-fits-all kind of approach to training and development and all that sort of thing. Real-time data, this I love. This has been one of the most effective and helpful aspects of transitioning with the company that I am in now and with some of the companies that I consult with. The real-time data is priceless. Responding and reacting to what's happening in your company, in your population in real time changes the game. It really does in terms of productivity, in terms of employee wellness and happiness, in terms of retention. And I'm going to talk a little bit about in these cases on how that works. Some of the scalable methods you see here, real-time feedback, mobile first, you know, career navigation tools, micro-learning gamification. There's a lot of different avenues and a lot of different tools to use to accomplish these things, and they're really, really helpful. I'm going to talk about some of them just because those are the ones that I've used, but there's a lot. There's a range in terms of cost. So some companies, even within my organization, we have, you know, some of our properties can't spend a lot of money. Some of them can kind of buy into the bigger picture. We have to look at that from a cost perspective, and there's a lot of options. You can do a lot of different things. And, you know, obviously there's the growth and development aspect. So I'm going to give some examples from a retail and a hospitality. That's the space that I'm in, and it's what I deal with the most. And we're going to talk about some of these challenges. Frontline leaders lacked coaching and support, causing inconsistency. This kind of is a generalized thing, but it really encompasses a lot of what we deal with from different companies. It starts from your front line, and then it just backlogs. Solutions, implementing diverse learning platforms and personalized paths, and then using AI to find your solutions. So when we're looking at these things, we're going to go through these scenarios. So, sorry, I can barely see this here, so I'm looking over here. Scenario one, initial struggle. We have, sorry, I can't see what I have here. So establishing accountability as a new general manager. I'm gonna walk around if you don't mind. So this is an example of a new manager. This company that we worked with grew exponentially, right? They had a lot of promotions. They promoted from within, which is fantastic, but that comes with its own problems. And in this company, we implemented, again, looking backwards, we implemented some AI tools in order to evaluate and establish what was happening and where the problems were. So this company used Workday, right? Workday flagged the issue. And one of the ways in which Workday flagged the issue was looking at when this leader took control of this department, some of the numbers went down, right? The basic numbers that you look at, you know, sales numbers, employee attendance issues, different things. Degreed, which is a great learning platform, recommended micro-learning modules and virtual coaching. Micro-learning modules have been really influential in our organization in that our leaders can have recommendations from our AI tools that give them micro-learning. So it may be leadership issues on how to have difficult conversations. It may be leadership issues on you know, how to evaluate an employee effectively, how to give real-time feedback. And you know, the virtual coaching, you can establish different platforms that will set up something, and it can be virtual coaching that's outsourced, or you can set this up within your organization, and that I think is really cool. So you can have different leaders in your organization sign up as virtual coaches, and you can set up with these tools a virtual coaching network. So then your new leaders come into this virtual coaching platform and are continually coached based on feedback loops that you have set up. And this allows this individual to receive real-time feedback, real-time coaching, not twice a year, not once a year on this is what you can do better as a leader, but in real time, and apply that every day. Spark City, this was built by Walmart, built by an employee in Walmart. This was really cool in that it has simulations that allow this employee to go in and have simulative experiences of running a department in a retail location. So, for example, they went through multiple scenarios and multiple simulations, and she could log in on her own, or she could be assigned things that need to be done at a certain time. And it's a safe environment for an employee or a new leader to be able to sit down and have these exchanges and have these coaching interactions or have these experience with customers or employees or whatever it may be built into it. That's a lot different than if you were to sit down with HR or your boss and role play. I don't know if anyone else hates role playing as much as I do, but it's horrible. I've never enjoyed it. I've never found the benefit of it. It's always made me insecure. This is a great tool for that. I've seen a lot of good things happen in this safe environment where they can role play, go through the different things until they're comfortable with different interactions and until it feels a little bit intuitive, right? They're coming up and it's not going to be the exact situation the employees are dealing with, but it's going to give them the ability to kind of reflect back and think about how they handled these things and what the outcome was. When this company did this, the KPIs improved 25%. The team engagement scores rose because this manager was learning on the go on how to interact. And the executive was having a lot of success in using these tools with coaching that manager and allowing the manager to go through this process on her own. And everything was happening in real time. Every week, you know, there was things that were happening that improved the overall success. All right, so this is a good one in that this happens all the time in what I do. I don't know how it translates into a lot of different industries, but I'm assuming it's a pretty common problem. We have employees who really, really want to get promoted and want to move up in the company. They have no idea how to get there, and they also don't have the security level to come forward and say, hey, I want to raise my hand. And if they're waiting until the end of the year to be able to talk about it, by that point they may have moved on. So this was a really fun scenario and a really fun example that we had where this employee really wanted this, really wanted to get promoted. Great customer service, great interactions, but at the executive level, everything was busy, the company was growing, there just wasn't a focus, or the executive wasn't noticing really that this employee had a lot of opportunity and wasn't taking the time to sit the employee down, because who has time on an ongoing basis to sit all of your great employees down and say, hey, what do you want, what's your future? The reality is we should be doing it, but we don't. So the amazing thing about this is we had put systems in place that identified his potential through performance data, learning, enthusiasm, and these were interactive tools that were being used. So these were, the employees were able to give feedback through their scheduling system. The employees are able to talk to each other. They're able to engage. The leader can go through and look at that and see how are the employees engaging with each other in the surveys that were being given, how the employee was responding, what things they were interacting with, the training that was being requested or not requested. So there's reports that, I call them reports, but AI goes through in its mind and it recognizes and it says, hey, this person is a potential for promotion or leadership. They have high engagement, their attendance, it looks at their attendance scores, right? When are they coming to work? When are they leaving work? How often are they calling in sick? Hey, they have high engagement, they have high enthusiasm. We should probably take a look at this employee. And then it gets recommended to the employee that they should sign up for leadership certificate programs and get assigned to a learning path. The employee on their own can sign up for these leadership certificate programs, can go through the process, can sign up for a learning path. Then comes the point where they sit down with their leader and their leader says, hey, this is going great. Keep up on that progress. What are you learning? What are you not learning? But even if that conversation never happens, this employee is still going through the promotional path because of their own initiative and because of AI's recognition and the system saying, hey, we've got a good one here. Let's really focus on this employee. And it also, conversely, will identify employees that are having issues and recommend ways that we can, help them get on the right path. For this specific employee, it led to a supervisory role, it led to a promotion, better scores in the department, employees were happier, so it was an overall good outcome. And this is all using tools that can evaluate your ecosystem and your employee population. Here's another example, and examples I think are great. They'll help you learn. When we get to the question part, you can ask for more information, but if anything pops out, please let me know. So in this one, again, we had AI analytics running. We identified department morale. And here's how we did it. This is really interesting. So clock in and out times. I've mentioned this already once, but this is a really good tool because if your employees are clocking in, let's say they've got a grace period of 5 minutes or 7 minutes, or they're clocking out early, a few minutes here, a few minutes there, even if they're coming 15, 20 minutes late. But there are really good trends that you can look at and you can watch. And you can say, okay, I've got the majority of my population now clocking in exactly at the minute they need to or a couple minutes late. When 3 months ago, 4 months ago, under this previous leader, people were clocking in early, they were getting to work, on time, they were ready to go, they were, clocking out, on time, not clocking out early, not coming in late, all of that sort of stuff. Employee check-ins. In this scenario, the venue had employee check-ins, and they were to go in and check in, gauge their temperature. Are you loving your work right now? Are you liking coming to work? Can you not wait to leave? It asked about 10 different questions, and the employees would answer those questions periodically. And in that case, it was anonymous, so employees just went in, and this is how I'm feeling. Those sentiment scores went way down, and gaming participation used to be the gaming participation was about 60%. Employees were engaged. If there was downtime at work, they were getting on the gaming. They were doing different things. And in this case, the gaming was, learning how to make different drinks. We had used AI models to make drinks and talk about the ingredients while they were going in. And so it was fun stuff for them to do, but not fun if you're not happy at work. So that was very helpful. And then we used heat maps to pinpoint problem areas. And again, with the micro-learning and coaching, we ended up initiating that with the managers. So the managers got micro-learning, they got some coaching, they got some development, because we pooled all the different things that the employees were talking about on their check-ins and their feedback surveys of what they weren't liking. They didn't have enough product, they didn't have enough supplies, the manager was in a bad mood, their uniforms weren't cleaned, all those sorts of things. So we tailored the micro-learning based on how to notice and how to look at those different actions. So focus check-ins, micro-coaching, all those recommendations, turned it around in about 3 months. Turnover dropped 18%, and the team members started to interact, engage more, and we ended up with 2 other promotions out of that. So very helpful. And then got a couple more examples here. Inconsistency and high turnover, guest satisfaction declined. Here's some of the tech solutions that we looked at: Better Up for AI coaching, Viva Insights for analytics, engagement surveys, and then simulation training, which I mentioned a little bit before. This is just another platform for that, which is also amazing. Simulation training can be built out, and this can get a little bit more costly, but it can be built out to specifically tailored to your organization, which is amazing. And then smart scheduling tools, 7 shifts data were implemented. And those things allowed us to, the scheduling tools allowed us to look at work-life balance and how people were, how much time individuals are spending. We had a couple of new managers that were spending way too much time at work. And we ended up implementing tools to help them manage their new schedule, manage their new work life, their new responsibilities, and end up with an overall better scenario. But Better Up is also another one that's really fantastic. in terms of coaching. And so when we started this last project, 72 hours was on average what the managers were spending at work a week, which is excessive from anyone's gauge. And when we changed their approach to work and gave them some tools, we also gave them Asana, right, scheduling apps, and that was fantastic because they were able to put everything that they needed to do, and they were able to, schedule it out to their employees. They were able to, look at their workload and what they needed to accomplish and get the help that they needed really quickly with a click of a button. Employee satisfaction scores increased 35% in this scenario, which was incredible, by implementing all of those tools, which took time, and it was a process, but it was worth it in the end. And we had finally, which was a fun fact, is we had people work off for full weekends. And they hadn't done that in about a year. So they wouldn't, whether it be a Tuesday, Wednesday for them or a Saturday, Sunday. So all of those things together just helped build a more healthy organization. This is the last one I'm going to do just because I know we have a time constraint. But analysis paralysis. This was at the executive level where the executives could not make a decision, or would make a decision and change that decision 4 days later. And sometimes that had huge impacts because a decision would be made, an email would go out and say, hey, we need all of this stuff done, we need decks, we need analysis, we need financials, we need this upon this decision we're gonna make. And then 3-5 days later, never mind, we're not doing that anymore. Meanwhile, the employees had worked 10, 12-hour days, late into the night, on weekends, to turn this urgent stuff around. And this was happening on an ongoing rotational basis. So this was the way of life in this scenario. We integrated some AI tools, Viva Insights, that should be microboards, and ChatGPT. And what these things did is, we also in this scenario implemented microboards. And what this did was help our leaders sit down and have these conversations with a little bit more information in the beginning, and do a little bit more on the spot research. So when we were sitting in these meetings and talking about we want to do this, we want to do that, we stopped for a second and we said, what are some of the key 5 main questions that we have? Went right into ChatGPT, asked a couple of those questions. We went, rolled through some of our employee insights and some of the demographic insights, locational insights, things like that. Let's talk about those really quickly right now. 10 years ago, you couldn't do that quickly. It took a lot of people investigating a lot of different things. And so teaching the executive team how to use some tools on the spot during that conversation to think about, do we even want to move forward? Is this even possible? Does this even fit? Before engaging your team to spend a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of energy to go through and do all of this stuff just to tell them, never mind, we're not interested. It can be really damaging. So in about 3 weeks, the strategy improved and the impact on the teams improved. The faith in the team that, hey, we're going to be making decisions, we're going to be sticking with decisions. I can do all of this work, it's going to be impactful. That improved really, really quickly with just using the tools at our disposal in real time. I think we're probably running short on time, so I'm gonna skip up to this tool because this is probably a better use of our time. These are some of the tools and tech stack that I've used and our organization has used. Coaching and training, here's some examples here. Scheduling and ops. All of these have an interactive component to them, which is really, really helpful. Learning platforms, these are some of the ones that we've used that have been really helpful, and analytics and feedback. If you incorporate these 4 components into your approach with your leadership style and how to drive your company, you're going to have really quick and really effective changes. So I think it's really important as executives and as leaders to look at this as a whole and look at how our employee population responds to the way that we're bringing them along in the organization, the way that we're coaching them, the way that we're training them. Using real-time analytics of your population, I love the check-ins, I love the gamification, I love even 7 shifts where employees can talk back and forth to each other. It's extremely valuable. I have my HR teams checking in on that all the time to say, hey, what are they talking about? Because they get going and they don't care that it's, that all these people have access to it. And that's fantastic because we can look at that and we can say, all right, this week, everybody seems to be upset about their dirty uniforms, or everybody seems to be upset about the fact that we've changed our mind 16 times or everybody seems to be upset about the fact that we put new menu items on the menu 2 hours before a shift. Little things like that are extremely helpful because then we can turn around and we can use the coaching and training tools to have our managers and our leaders integrating those tools into their day-to-day and having responses for what the impact of what these things are, right? So they're learning about their team as they go along. As executives, we're learning about the ecosystem and the employee population as a whole, and we're looking at different things than, time to fill, retention reports, those kind of things, because all of that matters, but it doesn't anymore. Because if you're not controlling your ecosystem and you're not giving a positive environment and an environment that resonates with the employees that are in it, you're not really going to get very far. And so really, I think where we're headed allows us to, as was mentioned before, plan for the future, plan ahead, think about the future. We can, address things, but continued use of these tools allows us to start reacting and planning and being more strategic. This is just my approach, assess and benchmarking, designing what the adaptive training is and where we're at. We look at the financials, we look at what's going on in the employee population, and we decide what the importance level of everything is. Providing the access. I think it's really, really important to have components of this for your entire workforce population. If you are just addressing your senior leadership or your salaried individuals, you're not capturing everything that you need to capture. If you are integrating all of these tools for your entire population, you're going to understand from a holistic view what's happening in your company, and you're going to understand how you need to respond and how you need to react, and the value of being able to do that in real time is significant. And then the feedback loops, again, real-time data, real-time things every day. Now granted, you have to have people that are looking at it, but a lot of these systems automate themselves, and depending on budget and finances, you can set these AI tools to send out, hey, employee, do this. Hey, employee, do this. Hey, do you want to get promoted? Hey, try this training module. Hey, try this. Hey, do a little more engagement. So it really depends, but what your organization's capabilities is, but the feedback loops and paying attention to them are really, really important. And then, long-term development activities, all that sort of thing, and talent pipeline goals can all be met if you're looking at these tools. So these are some of the key takeaways. The transformation that you can implement in your organization, again, like I've said many times, is invaluable. Team dynamics will improve so much. And one of the cool things that has happened with our organization that we weren't really expecting is the engagement of the teams with each other about these tools and about what they're doing and about, instead of just talking all day about what they saw on Instagram, they're now incorporating a little bit of, their gamification, a little bit of, hey, I did this coaching tool or that coaching tool, and then that filters into another employee who then is interested in it. And so we're getting them talking about these things and really incorporating it into the culture of the company. And another thing that is a side effect that I've seen of this, the ownership and confidence. Employees being able to feel like they own their career progression and that they own their place in the company and that it is up to them and they have some control over where they go is invaluable. I think that this is something that our workforce population now really, really wants, and I think it's something they really, really need. Having a boss that maybe talks to you twice a year, dictating your success in a company, or dictating whether or not you have opportunities or you can get promoted, or worrying about if you're too shy, you're never going to get promoted. All of these things impact someone's confidence and impact their ability to make great decisions for themselves and take what's in front of them. And I think that's a really important thing to take away, and a kind of side effect that we hadn't thought of, because it levels the playing field. And you have these AI tools that are telling you, hey, employee A over here that maybe nobody's paying attention to actually has a lot of potential, and let's go and have a conversation with this employee. And employee B over here really wants to be promoted but is struggling with these 8 things. So let's get that employee the tools that they need. And it's just really incredible, the transformation that can take place. So, and then of course that goes into the strategic impact, of all the different things that I've kind of talked about that you can get out of this. So I tried to go fast because I know we have short on time, but questions, I've kind of got some things laid out that you can think about here, but does anyone have any questions off the top of their head?